Well, good evening, everyone. At least good evening for me, just now evening here in Indianapolis. And I'm glad to have you with me for another Live with Kevin. And I'm pausing momentarily here because my friend Darrin Gray is not here, and I hope he's okay. I just checked to see if I'd gotten a message from him. But I'm here. And if you're here live, we're going to chat for a little bit. Let me give you a little bit about why we're doing these in general. And then if Darrin joins us, we'll go from there. And if not, I'll answer any questions that any of you have about influence or anything else. So again, welcome. And I'm so glad that you're here as a part of our celebrating our 30th year anniversary celebration, doing this series of lives. Basically, the story is that over the last number of years, I've been the interviewer of over 600 people, last time I counted, on podcasts and in a variety of other media situations. And I've been on the other side of the mic as the person being interviewed on lots of podcasts, radio shows, and that sort of thing. But it's in this series, it's the first time where I'm being interviewed, if you will, on our platforms. And so that was the idea of this 30th anniversary series, to give us the chance to give back by sharing some things that we know and inviting super interesting, fun, and talented people to join me. And Darrin Gray is one of those people. And again, I don't know why he's not here. I'm hoping all is well with him. So if you're here with me, here's what I'd like you to do. I should have said this first. Say hello. Whatever social channel you're on, go into the comments and type in and say hello. Tell us where you're from. That way, if you want to comment, you can, but that'll get your fingers used to doing that, right? So just go on in and say hello. Hope you'll do that. And what I'm going to do, since Darrin's not here, is take any questions that anyone has, which means this could be a very short live, but also the topic tonight, as you are aware by seeing it wherever you're at, is to talk about what tractors have to do with influence. And for most people, they probably don't have much to do with influence. I'll show you one of mine real quick. And here it is. This is a toy tractor. Clearly, I happen to have the full-size version of this exact same tractor as well. Let me make it so you can see it better. This tractor, this toy, is older than I am. Some of you might say, Kevin, that's pretty old. And the real one that I have, that this is a model of, is also older than I am. But when Darrin and I were having a conversation about doing this, I'd asked him to join me to do one of these, and he graciously said yes. And we were talking a little bit about what the topic should be. And we got to talking about my kidhood a little bit. And we got to talking about tractors, and that led to a conversation about how tractors could be connected to influence. So I'm not going to go into that story too much because I'm hoping that sometime we can do this with Darrin here. But what I will say is that we can talk about influence right now. And oh, Darrin says, what do I click on? So Darrin, I'm going to send you a note with the link. Give me 1 second. And I'll get that to you. Hold on. There we go. I'm going to send this to you, Darrin, in LinkedIn as a note. And then you can click it, and then you'll join us. It'll make it very, very simple. If I can type, we'll make this happen. This makes for really good television, I realize, everybody. Here is the link. It's this one that I put into... I thought I put it into a message in LinkedIn before, but maybe I didn't. But there it is. And so, Darrin, when you click on that, you'll be right there to join me. So that means that Darrin will be joining us. So that means that if you have a question for us, if you have a comment for us, you can share it. And I've given you sort of the background of why we're doing this. So when Darrin gets here, I'll introduce him and we'll get started. But again, our topic tonight is to talk a little bit about influence, and we're going to connect that to my kidhood, I think. But we're going to let Mr. Gray handle that for us when he gets here. So we'll take another second or two. But you saw what Darrin did. If you're with us live, you can go ahead and make a comment and tell us where you're from. Make a comment and ask a question, and you can do those things. And we'll wait just another second or two for Darrin to arrive. While we're waiting for him to arrive, there he is. I have to wait no longer. There he is, Mr. Darrin Gray. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, friend. I'm good. Thank you.
So I've sort of given everyone the background of why we're doing these in general, but I haven't really told people, Darrin, why you. And when we were deciding to do this series, we thought about people that we thought would be comfortable doing this. Clearly, this is in your wheelhouse. We thought about people that know us well enough to maybe say yes to this kind of odd request. And in both cases, you were near the top of our list. So Darrin, let me introduce Darrin Gray, and then I'm going to hand the mic to him, if you will, let him sort of lead this conversation or interview me, if you will, or at least lead our conversation. So there we go. Now we got, there we go. Hello, Heidi. Originally from San Diego, now in Reno. I love Lake Tahoe. What a pretty, pretty place. Heidi. So Darrin Gray is with me. He is my collaborator this evening. He is an event producer, an MC, a speaker, an author, a sports ministry media ministry executive with Athletes in Action. He does some really, really cool stuff, everybody. He advances an NFL sanctioned Super Bowl breakfast, an NBA All-Star breakfast, a pro player prayer project. That's hard to say. He's involved in the John Wooden Keys to Life Award, and he's responsible for or involved in the He Gets Us media campaign, which I've seen the campaign, don't know much about what your role is in that. He maintains an influential network of NFL players, coaches, and alumni. His expertise includes sponsorship, sports media, obviously sports ministry, obviously mass mentoring, and fatherhood, as through his involvement with All Pro Dad. He's co-authored the book, The Jersey Effect, Beyond the World Championship, about Tony Dungy's Super Bowl team. He's done all sorts of really cool stuff. He happens to live in Indianapolis, where I live. He and his wife, Leslie, have been married for 29 years. They have 4 grown children. And all I can say about that, Darrin, is I got more years and less kids. So we'll leave that at that. Darrin, it's a pleasure to have you, for us to have this conversation about influence in tractors. Before you got here, I was talking a little bit about how we came to this topic, yes, and you asked me some questions, and this is sort of where we landed. So lead us on, sir.
Well, as I understand it, tractors were formative in your young life, and that it was a family member that taught you your love of tractors. So talk about, was it your father?
Yeah.
Tell us about that influence and why that struck a chord in you, and how that lifelong love affair has led you to really dedicate your life to do tractor collecting. Just share with the audience a little bit about that.
Well, before you got here, I was showing a picture of one of my toys. Nice. This toy, older than me, and I have the full-size version of this particular tractor. But I grew up on a farm in Michigan, and so tractors, especially green ones, were a part of my kidhood for sure. And then sort of the rest of the story, Darrin, you know, because you live in Indianapolis, that Indianapolis is the home of the Indiana State Fair. I love the State Fair. And the story that I'm going to tell that hooks this all together took place at the State Fairgrounds, about 25 years ago. Because on the one end of the fairgrounds, there's an area called Pioneer Village, which is sort of a working exhibit of farm and rural life. And still true now, but less true than it was then. People could bring their antique tractors to exhibit at the fair. And at the time, every evening, there was a parade, of which the largest percentage of the parade was tractors. And I knew all of this. And my dad was in town for the fair, and I know the people that run Pioneer Village. And so I thought, Darrin, hey, I can get Son of the Year award if I can get my dad to be in this parade, because he'd love this. You know, he's a farmer, all this. And so I go to talk to my buddies that I know that run Pioneer Village, Purdue Ag Alumni Association, of which I was once the president. And I said, Tim, can you introduce my dad? Hey, could you get a couple of tractors for Dad and I to be in the parade? People that aren't here, but you have access to their tractors, etc. He said, well, let me see. Come back and see me like 5:30. So we come back at 5:30. Line up for the parade starts at 6. He says, I have a tractor for your dad. Not for you, but for your dad. I said, what about me? He says, I got one tractor. It's for your dad. I said, okay. So I decide I'm going to ride with him, which I find out later you're not supposed to do. But like, I'm going to stand behind. It's pretty safe as slow as we're going. I'm going to hold on to the fender, hold on to the back of the seat, and I'm going to go have this experience with my dad, which is exactly what happened. And somewhere, Darrin, in the shorter version of the story, somewhere in the first 200 yards, like we're not even up to the back of the grandstand yet, and I have decided that I need to have a tractor at the fair. Like, I live in suburban Indianapolis. I got no place for a tractor. I got none of that makes any sense. But the connection to influence is this. Somewhere along that path, I realized, I was connected to farming and to tractors as a kid. I loved the fair. This was a way for me to hook all this stuff together. It ended up being a hobby I shared with my father while he was still alive. But the idea here is that even when things seem difficult, even when things seem irrational, even when things are hard, when we have a clear reason why something will happen, then it might just happen that we would end up with a tractor at the fair. So I actually have a picture here. It's a good picture, not really a good picture of me, but it's a good picture. Let's see. If I share the screen, this is a picture several years after that story of my wife, Lori, and I think you can see it. There you go. With my wife, Lori, and I at the state fair with what is our Purdue tractor. So the story here, the first connection here is that there's tremendous opportunities for us to be more influential when we can help people find a reason why. We'll get rid of that picture now. When we can help people find a reason why, and when we can connect people to something that is meaningful. Like at the end of the day, the fact that I own now a bunch of antique tractors, it has very little to do with the tractor itself, right? It has to do with stuff that's connected to my life, that's connected to my why. And that was sort of a little bit of what led us to say, hey, let's connect this idea of tractors to influence. I think people would probably really rather talk about influence, I suppose, than tractors. But that's the short version of the story. Yes, I grew up around them. Yes, I figured that someday when my father passed that I might own a tractor or two. Did I have any idea that I would now own 13 of them? No, none. And it has, at the end of the day, it has very little to do with tractors.
Yes. Yeah, a whole lot more to do with legacy and the meaning making that this provides in your life. I connect that to a dear friend of mine in Houston who's a large landowner, and he tells me that his best days are the days that he can mow straight lines in his massive yard. And you might go, well, that sounds like a radical waste of time. And he's, no. This is like how I focus. This is how I sort of regenerate that part of me that needs to move away from the chaos and the movement of the world to find some orderliness and meaning making. And I connect that to you. I suspect that there may be some similarities and parallels as you think about what these tractors mean to you and your family and your lifelong legacy.
There's no doubt when I'm at the farm now, which I own, my wife and I own with my sister and my brother-in-law. And especially when I'm on, I now own one of the tractors that I spent the most time on as a kid.
Yes.
And I was reflecting on this summer, Darrin. I was on that tractor driving down the road, and I felt like I was I don't know, 18, 12, 22. Like I did not feel 61
Perhaps
years
you,
old. Like
perhaps you were.
I was a different person
Yes.
driving down that road on that piece of equipment that I had driven down hundreds of times before, going to actually mow with it, as it turns out in this
Yes.
case. But on property that I own in the community that was not part of our original family farm. And but the connection to the past, but also to your point about having something where, because environment matters a lot in terms of our able to regenerate, our ability to think,
Yes.
our ability to do all sorts of things, and that's sitting on one of those, walking around them even, is one of those things that does that for me, right? And so if we want to be more influential with others, one of the things we have to do is find out what those touchstones are for them. And if we can find those touchstones for them, then we have the chance to help, to inspire them, perhaps to persuade them, certainly to influence them.
Yeah. Welcome to influence. It's something that you've known about and been experiencing for a long time, even with this podcast, all of the forms of outreach which you do to help people live their best lives, and especially in a career setting. But it's really remarkable when we can help another kind of journey after what it is that brings the most meaning and purpose in their life. And so that tractor is nothing but a metaphor for all of us. For
Exactly.
some perhaps it's sports. For some it's it can be many other things. I collected coins as a child, and I still have a large coin collection that is meaningful. And it's not so much, it was the pursuit of the steel penny that came about during the war.
World War II, right?
Exactly. And so how did that lead to sort of this broader love of what it means to sort of slow down and think about what not the coins mean to me, but the process of enjoying them. And so earlier this year, I got out the entire collection. I took the table in a room not far from here and just began to reflect upon each of the movements. And inside of that,
And you remember when you got some of those coins, right?
I can. And because there were some that sort of completed a collection, and it was, I believe that people support what they help to create. And so I had other family members that would help me to create the completed collections, because each one had their own book. And I'm collecting pennies. So although there are some very, very valuable pennies, it's sort of indicative of, there's no great value in its singularity, but it's the process that creates the value and the meaning making, kind of like a tractor in straight lines. But doing that with family.
I have a whole story about the straight line thing, if you want to go there too. But I'd like to connect this to the work that you do too. I mean, obviously for you, it's not tractors, but in the work that you do with athletes,
yes,
or using sports as a conduit,
yes,
to influence,
yes,
ultimately. Like, what have you learned about this idea of helping of helping people find that why, or helping people find that meaning? Like, what have you learned in that arena that would apply to what we're talking about tonight?
When I listen really well to an athlete who shares their heart for what it is that they really want to accomplish in the world, beyond the pursuit on the field, and that's right. We want to help them get what they want, which is be a better athlete, so they can get what they need, which is to find that deeper, more meaningful place that's going to allow them to have the longevity and to pass their family values on for 5 generations. Now, think about that. Most people are thinking about, hey, can I pass something on to my kids? And I'm not talking about your money, although that may be part of it in an athletic setting if there's wealth generated in a pro context, in a business context too. But what I get them thinking about is, like, can you extend your value system too? And how do you do that through the way that you're generous now, how you share your influence with the world, and how do we pass this on to our children, our children's children, so on and so forth. And so these are the kind of conversations that I enter into with great regularity. And many of our listeners or viewers here today are probably thinking or may not be thinking about, hey, can I create influence 5 generations deep? But there's some remarkable and pioneering work going on right now in the financial services industry, which kind of permeates all of us. Perhaps have some sort of a financial plan, I hope.
Right.
And how do we do that? But think about passing our values down. And when we get to the values, that was reflected in your tractor, perhaps in my coins, neither of which matter in and of themselves, but in our life and our value making, they really do. And it's this heritage work that we're really trying to pass forward. So these are the kind of things I think about with athletes. And then, yes, I live in sort of a Sharpie world, and people want, an autograph, and it's sort of a strange thing. There you go, both green.
I picked the green one. I've got several sitting here.
As I've stood in line, tens of thousands of interactions with famous people standing beside me, either to sign a book or to greet, and this idea of this autograph and that transference of value that happens when the moment happens. But a dear friend, Tony Dungy, some of your viewers may know him. He was the first African American head NFL coach to win a Super Bowl. Now that's a remarkable milestone. Now he's on Football Night in America, but I've stood with him, and I'm not exaggerating, over 10,000 times as people have come for their moment, for their 45 seconds to 3-minute interaction with him. And not once has he ever been ruffled, angry, frustrated. He understands that this is a gift that he's able to transfer, but oftentimes they'll want a photograph. And for Tony, he goes, and there'll even be professional photographers in the room. But that professional photographer's photo will never make it back, or has a less likelihood of making it back to the individual. And so Tony oftentimes says to the person, hey, this doesn't really become special until it's on your phone. And that's the moment that they get to embrace that moment. And then from there, tell the story of the influence, the impact, perhaps, that he's had on them, on culture, now that he's sold, just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books across 20 different titles, which is crazy, right? The Uncommon and all the derivations of that, all the children's books, The Quiet Strength, Mentor Leader. And so people feel like they know him, and yet what they're really doing is living out their own story, claiming a virtuous part of Tony as an exemplar. That's what he is. And as an exemplar, hey, I want to be a little bit more like that. So why wouldn't he want that moment to be captured on a photograph so that they could then take that and transfer that? Just as you transfer the tractor knowledge, they're transferring that moment to say, hey, this is even more important than an autograph, because it marks a moment, and not from a celebrity and a fame perspective. Like, we all get that that's fleeting for all but the most famous people.
Right.
And yet in the midst of that platform that some men and women have been given through sports, entertainment, any number of places, I think that it can be used for really, really noble purposes. And I've had a few special moments, but none more special than a young man that walked up in a Walmart receiving line, hundreds of people long, hundreds. And this man waited patiently for his moment, and he froze. He froze up. And in the moment, he looked at me and he looked over, and in that moment, there was a greeting. It happened very quickly. There was an autograph, but he moved on. But he had something in his heart he needed to share. And so the event ended. Tony departed. The person speaks to me, and he says, "Where's Tony next?" And I said, "Dallas." And that young man rented a car drove to Dallas, Texas, stood in another receiving line, and he didn't miss his moment. He didn't miss that chance to say, look, you mean something to me, like sharing that meaningful moment that Tony had on his life, and in so doing created this virtuous cycle. Then of course from there a relationship was struck, and that man went on to have some meaningful dialogue post event with Tony and I, and from there to do good and noble things in the world. But I think that all of us can learn a little bit from those kind of stories of what links are we willing to make sure that our exemplars can transfer their values, and then how do we then use those values to live a better life, be more fruitful, be more kind, more loving, and that's really
whatever those exemplars are, right? Whatever those
exactly.
characteristics, behaviors are, right?
There you go.
I think it's really interesting that you share that. A couple of things that come to my mind as you're saying that. One is that one of my whys for the tractor at the fair part of this whole thing was to connect this generational thing, was connect my kidhood to my children. So I was, multiple generations of farmers, before me. That's not my kids, never going to be my kids, but they've got more of a connection. They've got somewhat more of a connection to that because of tractors than they would ever have had before. So that was part of that story. But to leave that, and for us, as all of us as leaders, for us as humans, and for us as leaders, when we think about the influence that we can have, we can think about it generationally, like you're talking, but we can also think about it like ripples in the pond, right? Like the Tony example is he has used his platform to create ripples in the pond at a different level. Of course, that's why we're doing this series. Like we've been at this work for 30 years, and this is a way, this series of 30th anniversary things are a way to say, here are some things we've learned. Here are some people we've learned from and with, like you, and coming together to just have that conversation and to talk. And that's influence at the highest level, is to creating those ripples in the pond, right?
Well, you're speaking truth. The book that I wrote, The Jersey Effect, in many ways was sort of about that, in that how do we acknowledge that whatever context we're in, hey, we are going to have a positive or negative influence on those around us. So let's make it positive. And what steps do we need to take to sort of build up our own character so that when those moments happen, that we can be prepared, just as an NFL athlete prepares, or any athlete prepares. And so I think I've got a lot to learn, but the strong blend of humility and confidence, and they seem to be mutually exclusive to the world.
They are absolutely
to
not.
me, they're not, because when we come with a posture of, hey, I don't have it all figured out, I'm the humble expert even, and yet this confidence that, man, God's going to show up. I got this, I can do this, and people believe in me. There's a lot of goodness that can transpire there.
So if you, I knew this would happen. You and I would start talking, and then there'd be like 30 things going on in my head here. And so that idea of humble and confident, like if anybody, just think about this for a second. If you know someone that seems confident or is confident but isn't humble, you immediately call them cocky.
Yes.
And that is not an attractive quality. And I don't mean attractive as in physically attractive. I mean attractive, like that's someone that I want to connect with. That's someone that I want to be, that I want to learn from. That's someone that I want to follow.
Yes.
Right. But that quiet confidence, that quiet strength that we were talking about a minute ago, right? Hooking those two things together is a very influential match, for sure.
Yeah. And can your passion still shine through as I've aged? And we're a lot grayer than when we first met decades ago.
Yes.
And as we marched in the community and made our points of influence and impact and our careers, and we've let our light shine, I've been accused a few times of being animated and passionate, and I am all of those things. But as I've matured, like, it's You know, I know that things are going to work themselves out. I've got a confidence that, hey, if I am disciplined, that we're going to make a way through this. And so I think I've learned a lot about humility, and I know that you have too. You come across that way, and
100%.
man, that's what makes an awesome leader that we want to follow, and not a dictatorial way. And so there's plenty of things I think that we can do, learn from that exemplar, or those exemplars that embody those two characteristics.
I want to ask you another question, because one of the first things that I said, as I told you this
Yeah.
little story, is that finding the why. Like the why isn't really the tractor, right? And so I'm curious, and I'm kind of channeling the audience here a little bit.
Yeah,
Like,
please.
you work with a group of people who, in some cases, are famous, but that's not why I'm asking. They have tremendous passion. They have
Yes.
tremendous why.
Yeah.
They've built their life around this thing called being a professional athlete. And at ages when most people are just starting to figure life out,
Yes.
that part of their life is over.
Yes.
And so, and we all have heard the stories on the news of the athletes or the entertainers that never quite figure that out after, how do they make the next step successfully? But I know that that's part of your mission in all the work and the ministry that you do, is to help people with that. Like, what lessons can you give us as non-professional athletes about that you've learned from them, both from those who have made that transition successfully, and maybe some who haven't been as successful?
I've got a great illustration for you. So for those that were in Indianapolis or not, many remember a quarterback by the name of Peyton Manning.
He's a guy I think a lot. He's like on every other commercial, for heaven's sake.
Arguably, right, one of the 2 or 3 greatest quarterbacks of all time. Yep. But there was a great question in the minds of the Indianapolis Colts if they should draft a man named Ryan Leaf or Peyton Manning. Now, you may be wondering where I'm going with the story. For those of you that don't know, Ryan Leaf was bigger. He was stronger. He's a friend. He's a physical specimen. Actually, Peyton is pretty lean. He didn't have the strongest of physiques, but man, he would outsmart, he would outwork and outlead his competitor. But that's all easy to know in hindsight.
Right. It's easy now.
When
At that point, it was not easy.
When you are Jim Irsay and Bill Polian, those were the 2 primary decision makers around, hey, where should we go? They make a decision around pedigree, around, hey, who Peyton's family was, Archie, his dad. Hey, we made the right decision. Awesome. But I want to talk about Ryan, not about Peyton. So Ryan went on to have a short NFL career, battled drugs and alcohol, ended up getting incarcerated, and is now well into his recovery process. And he's never been more peaceful. He's never been more fulfilled as a man in the world. And now he's got a great broadcasting job. He's found his footing because his life calling wasn't just to be lived out through sports. And he was a tremendous athlete and in college, especially in Washington. But he needed that moment, that bump, like whatever that was, to get to this place in his life where he's a better father, he's a better man. And he would tell you that if he was on this program today. And I don't know why we have to go through what we all have to go through. But what I can tell you is that don't just assume when someone is falling that they don't have the wherewithal to recover and to find a way. And I think about this a lot because the bad, a lot of athletes get a bad rap. Oh, they're spoiled, prima donna. Are they really? Do they really care? And the answer is most of them do. Of course, there's some that are extremely self-obsessed,
just like there are in any profession.
Right? And so for me, I specialize in a good guy club. I specialize in men that are noble and honorable. Many of them have a faith relationship that's consistent with mine that allows me to be able to do special missional projects with them. But as I get to know them, their families, their children, and who they are, what I find is they're more resilient. Their value systems tend to, because their belief systems are strong, because they're walking on the right side of life, that they fare better in life. Their flourishing rate is higher. But in the moments that brokenness might enter in, or heavy burden, hey, ask for help. And this is what humility allows you to do. And so Ryan was humbled himself. He asked for help. He got help. And the help systems in and around the NFL in particular right now are phenomenal. No joke. The NFL has flooded its ecosystem, dating back to alumni and all the way through current day systems, to make sure that mental health and other things. You see this happening in Indianapolis with what Darius Leonard and Jim Irsay are talking about. And you see guys like Jim Irsay that have finally got his footing, and he's at peace. He's at peace because he's been able to sort of move beyond this destructive life to something greater. So I think it's just, me being present. I sometimes call it the ministry of availability, because ministry always moves best at the speed of relationship. So when I make myself available in relationship, when I listen, and you do begin to see patterns, but when you find the good guys, that even if they're troubled by the world, like, there's always hope. And I'll share this quick little story that I used this morning for a big event that I ran. 1957, there was a researcher by the last name of Richter. And so you may know this study, but he put a bunch of rats into water, and he would see how long they would swim. On average, the average rat could tread water for about 15 minutes before he would give up and die. What he began to find is, of about 14 minutes, he could pluck them out and set them on dry land, and give them a bit of hope that he could then put them back in the water, and they could swim exponentially longer. The question is, how much longer? The answer is 2.5 days. Think about that. So they went from, when they found hope, when they knew that, hey, this 15-minute crisis that I'm facing, like, I can get through it, I can make it, there's a chance that someone might rescue me. In other words, hope. Then when they put back in, they could swim on for up to 2.5 days. Now, the lesson for us is pretty clear. Like, how do we make sure that we have these doses of hope, that we surround ourselves with people that can help us in our times of deep need? And that's all that I do in and around the world of sports, is just reach down and say, hey, how are you doing today? And the pandemic afforded an amazing opportunity for everyone to, as the world stopped, each day I would call a new person, and I would just remind them of who they were, what they stood for, and find out how they were doing. And so I just want to encourage all of the listeners here today, whether they love tractors, whether they love sports, right, to take
I
the
love
time.
both.
Right?
I
Me
did bust
too.
out with the Bob McAdoo for you the other day.
You did. You got that right too, from the Wayback Machine. But what can each of the listeners and viewers do to reach out and find people that they can influence at the speed of relationship, and just say, hey, I'm thinking of you today. Pride text, prayer text, I love you because I believe in you, because I'm proud of you, because those three simple phrases in a text or a phone call can mean the world to people. And I think that's really how influence actually moves. And then, hey, yeah, we can tweet about those special moments too, or we can post it on Instagram, all good. But what are we going to do to make sure that people have plenty of hope? Because the world is a little tricky right now. There's a lot of crazy going on, but we can be the hope that we need in our own lives too.
So three things. First of all, the three comments again. I love you because.
Yeah, I love you because I believe in you, because I'm proud of you, because.
There you go. I love you because I believe in you, because I'm proud of you, because, and there you go, everybody. If you wanted something about influence, that's a way to have influence, by taking action. So I want to make a couple of final comments. First of all, Darrin, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you. I knew it would be super fun, and it would be uplifting to anyone who listened or watched now or later. The second thing I want to say is, earlier today, I sat in this chair and had a live stream with a different thing up in the corner that said Remarkable Leadership Podcast instead of 30 years. And I had Stephen M.R. Covey, and everyone knows who his dad was, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits. His son was on with me today.
Let's
We were
go.
talking about his last book, Trust and Inspire. And one of the things we talked about is one of the beliefs, if we want to be a leader that is a trust and inspire leader rather than a command and control leader, that one of the beliefs we have to have is that there's greatness within people. And I wanted to tie that back to what you were saying. Like, it's going to be hard for us to provide hope for others, whether they're in our family, in our community, on our team as a leader. If we don't see the greatness in them, that's how Stephen would say it. I would say if we don't see the potential in them, regardless of what words you use, if we don't see it or believe it, we can't share it and we can't help them see it. And taking that back to your moment of, in that moment of crisis, in that crucible moment, whatever you want to call it, in that moment I'm falling, if we don't still see that in them and help them see that in themselves,
yes,
if they don't have that hope, then they can't ultimately be successful. And everybody, that is a lot of good stuff right there about influence.
Yeah, you're onto something there. And I'll sum it up with a great quote from Chuck Noll, who was one of the most prolific coaches for the Pittsburgh Steelers of all time. And he said it this way early in Tony's career. He said, champions aren't champions because they always do extraordinary things. They're champions because they're willing to do the ordinary things better than anyone else. Translated, hey, are we willing to share time with each other, to talk about things of importance, and to do those ordinary things, to say, I love you because. So, Kevin, I love you because you are an amazing leader that is constantly pouring into the community, using outreach tools like StreamYard and LinkedIn and otherwise to encourage this community and help us be the best version of ourselves. So thank you for being that exemplar, and congratulations on your 30 years of service. And so proud to be with you here today to share that with you.
It's a pleasure. Everybody, thank you for joining. And Darrin, thank you so much for joining. And with that, everybody, we'll let you go on with your day, on with your evening. And whether you watched us with us live and you sort of didn't type because you were enthralled by what we were talking about, or whether you're watching this later, I hope that you were blessed. I hope you were inspired. And I hope it gives you ideas to be more influential with those around you starting right away. Thank you all very, very much.